Hi, thanks for joining me today. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Professor Viral Acharya. I'm a CV Star Professor of Economics in the Department of Finance at New York University Stern School of Business. I've also been a former Deputy Governor at the Reserve Bank of India. My research interests in financial economics are quite broad. I mainly focus on the banking sector and the financial system's risk as a whole. However, as a part of that, in the recent years, I would say since about 5 years, I've also taken a keen interest in understanding and studying some aspects of climate finance, how it affects banks, how it affects capital markets, how it affects the financial sector. And I look forward to talking to Anusha about some of these aspects.
Great, thanks so much. So, can you talk a bit about your work, like with regards to climate finance specifically?
Yeah, so I would say there are three sort of trains of thought in my research at present. One, perhaps unsurprisingly, given I'm from India, I'm studying heat risk, though we are probably feeling it in many other parts of the world, including around New York City right now as well, in this sort of first heat wave of this summer. In a country like India, with so many millions of workers in agriculture and other exposed industries, it's hard not to think about what impact heat has on labor productivity, what impact rising global temperatures have on energy expenditures due to higher air conditioning needs. And indeed, what impact through all of this it has on cost of living, because if agriculture is affected, it would raise the cost of food. If companies become less productive or have to incur bigger costs, they may try to pass on these higher costs in the products that they are selling to consumers in the economy. So there might be like a first order impact on inflation, for example. Also, if companies' costs are increasing, they become more vulnerable to rising heat temperatures. They might also actually have to pay higher costs to borrow and issue equity in capital markets. So broadly, I would say in one line of my research, I'm trying to think hard about how heat risk affects the economy. Of course, you have to then also think hard about how might companies, households, farming practices be adapting in order to mitigate the impact of heat risk on the productivity and costs of doing business. In the second line of my research, I'm investigating the impact of policy which is aimed at dealing with global warming, such as decarbonization, incentivizing or subsidizing investments in renewable innovations and storage innovations, putting restrictions on drilling. So these kinds of policies, decarbonization, subsidies for innovation in renewables and storage, and drilling restrictions, sometimes climate scientists, economists, financial economists, they call them as transition risk, which is we are trying to transition from a high carbon, high emissions economy to a low carbon, low emissions economy. But along the way, there is uncertainty created by how these policies will be implemented, how companies will respond to these policies, whether they'll be effective or not. Will future governments stand by the policies that are announced by the previous governments, and so on? So in my second line of research, I'm investigating how do these policies impact the cost of energy along the path of transition. So it's very clear that eventually, hopefully with storage innovations, we'll reach a lower cost of energy and at the same time have lower carbon emissions. But of course, along the way, there could be lots of uncertainty. Maybe supply of energy could get restricted in the process. And the question is, how does that impact energy prices? And one of our counterintuitive finding is that along the transition, because fossil fuel supply, which is carbon emission intensive, decreases because these firms anticipate carbon taxes and drilling restrictions, etc. Along the way of the transition, energy prices can rise. And so oil majors such as Exxon, which currently have big capacities, they suddenly benefit which is sort of very counterintuitive. In a way, you are trying to take away their source of profits from carbon emission capacity in the long run, but in the short run, they might benefit because energy prices might rise. So I'm studying some of these unintuitive effects of transition risk along the transition path. And in my last trend of research, I'm sort of doing sort of more work on the innovation aspects of renewable transition, which is in United States, the Inflation Reduction Act under the current administration has provided, close to $400 billion for innovation and in investments, which can be classified as sort of green energy innovations. And what exactly is the role of these subsidies? Why do we need them? And the key idea here, which goes back to other economists, Daron Acemoglu, Philip Aghion, and co-authors, is that innovation has a lot of spillover. So if one company achieves a better storage technology, that's going to completely revolutionize the way the rest of the entire economy is organized, the rest of the renewable sector is organized. We can start electrifying parts of the economy that are not yet electrified and so on. So we're trying to provide like a conceptual foundation for why we need the innovation subsidy. And in a country like United States, where it's basically hard to tax the fossil fuel industry, how do you actually design the innovation subsidies in the right way? Can you, in fact, design the innovation subsidies in the right way? Or do you need some threat of carbon taxes in the long run as well? We are comparing US to Europe in some of these analysis as well, and so on. So I would say those are the three big themes: heat risk and its impact on capital markets, banks, and firms, impact of uh, climate change policies on energy prices, and what exactly is the role of subsidies for green energy transition in this whole climate change challenge that is facing us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely a very comprehensive analysis and kind of research pathway for climate finance and kind of the impact of climate change with regards to like the economy, etc. So separate from that, you seem like you have a lot of background with economics, and like finance. So can you talk a bit about kind of what you did in college that led you to not only pursue economics, but also take this more like niche, like research standpoint about climate finance?
Yeah, so I'm a computer science by training actually in my undergrad, but at some point in my undergrad, I felt that this wasn't my calling. It didn't writing programs and studying complexity of algorithms, etc. It was very challenging. It was very stimulating, heavy duty math and all that, and it had its own uh, sort of problem solving appeal. But in the end, I didn't I felt I wanted to do something which would bring me closer to households in a very fundamental way. Maybe computing does revolutionize the way we live, but at least in 90s, I wanted to do something which would be closer to the households. So I just took a plunge when I came to New York University. I decided to try out another field. So I took some courses in finance and economics. I knew some family members who had done a PhD in finance, sort of distant family members. And it was a bit of just an exploratory choice. It worked out. I feel I have a much greater intuition and passion for this field than I did for computer science. So, it was a bit of exploring oneself that put me on the path to finance and economics. Why climate finance? I think, as I explained, when I was at the central bank in India, and I looked around and I started realizing how important food and energy sector are for an emerging market like India. So if you think about the consumer price inflation basket, so it's supposed to reflect the consumption basket of households in an economy. In India, given the levels of per capita income are so low, food and energy comprise more than 50% actually of the consumption basket. And then when you think about how climate change is likely to impact, and I think I don't even want to say it's likely to impact, I think it's already impacting. I think for those who are not able to see that yet, I think they are just sort of in my view, missing the facts on the table. The kind of temperatures we are witnessing the world over, the kind of energy costs, energy price fluctuations we are seeing. I think these are all telling signs that perhaps we do need to actually wrestle with these beasts right now. So anyway, coming back to my switch to climate finance, it's not a complete switch. I'm still doing my core research on banking and systemic risk. But three things. One, I really wanted to learn about climate finance, just to understand the impact it would have on inflation, impact it would have on companies, impact it could have on system stability and growth. Second, the best way to learn is to try and do something yourself. So that's why I started doing some research myself. And I've started with doing research on the United States for most part, and that's because of ease of availability of data and so on. But ultimately, and that's my third point, my real calling or passion for doing climate finance is to apply it to India. I want to understand how a large but relatively poor emerging market like India, poor in a per capita sense, would have to deal with this challenge going ahead, especially given the demographics, the fact that so many workers, millions of workers are in very high exposed industries like construction, mining, agriculture, and so on. So that was really the shift. I think even from a macro perspective, it's hard not to think hard about these issues. But as I said, for an emerging market like India, where food and energy are such big parts of the consumption basket of households, I think it's first order. Actually, it's not even something you want to do on the side.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely an extremely important field, and I think it's great, like the research you're doing and the applications to India. So can you talk a bit about if you had any beneficial experiences at New York University that might have helped you make this transition into climate finance more easily, whether that was like a professor that helped you or like a research experience or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so of course I'm biased, but I think New York University and especially Stern School of Business in the finance department where I work, I think it's a very eclectic group of faculty members doing sort of very exciting, cutting edge research. I encourage all the sort of budding junior and seniors who are looking to apply. If you're interested in business, my sense is Stern School of Business Schools, business undergrad is probably one of the best that is out there. So do consider us. But in any case, coming back to how my transition into climate finance was facilitated. So, there's a large number of colleagues here who are doing work already. Rob Engel, 2003 Nobel laureate in economics. Over the last 10 years, he has mostly focused on studying climate finance and its econometrics and how to extract signals of climate risk from publicly traded capital markets and prices and news. My colleague Johannes Strobel is probably one of the first movers in this area. He won the Fisher Black Prize, which is awarded to under 40 financial economist who has done the most path-breaking or innovative research. He won that 2 years back. And climate finance has been one of his key areas. He's also doing a lot of work with me, but also on his own, on how this transition is taking place, how to measure it, what is the impact on corporate production, how are they altering their investments, or are they simply greenwashing, which is they're just making a facade of them actually meeting many of these things. And then we have many junior colleagues who are very actively working in this area as well. So we have a center called Volatility and Risk Institute that Rob Engel and another professor, Dick Berner, run. Johannes Strobel heads the climate initiative side of it. I head the financial side of things. And so, it's just osmosis. The way most good research happens is not that you walk into your office and think you want to work on a particular thing, or you sit on a computer and look for an idea. It really happens through interactions, bouncing ideas back and forth, being on a whiteboard and trying to write things down. And that's how it was, very organic. It sort of just evolved. I came back and I felt I already had an idea I wanted to do this, but the moment I immersed myself back into the Department of Finance at NYU Stern after my stint at the Reserve Bank of India, I felt climate finance just took hold of me, so to speak. I think thanks to all the wonderful work that my colleagues are doing in this space.
Yeah, that's great. I think having a good peer and colleague group who are doing like work similar to what you're interested in is definitely really great. And it's amazing that they were able to help you like make that transition. So
Yeah, if
can
I could just add one thing, I fully agree with you. And I think this is a very important point in general in life, which is that I think sometimes one can get carried away by stamps and, like wanting a stamp on one's CV and wanting a certain brand on one's CV and wanting to go to a place with a certain kind of like, you know, sort of halo and glow around it. But I think ultimately what matters is on a day-to-day basis, do you have a team that you will be very excited to work with? I think you have to fit very well with the rest of the team. That team has to work in a way that the whole is more than the sum of the individual parts. And I feel that way when I'm at NYU Stern. I feel we are a great team, and collectively we sort of like like this movie Moneyball, in which you put together a baseball team, which are using statistics of like how can you create a combination of not always the star players, but a set of players who collectively actually punch above their weight. And sometimes I think that choice is very important. Of course, I think the world of NYU Stern regardless. But I'm saying that what's very critical for me as a part of this team, as a part of this group, is that one, I'm a good fit. Two, I can contribute to the team, they contribute to me. But three, collectively, we make the whole more than the sum of the individual parts. And that sort of teamwork, camaraderie, collective leadership is sort of very, very important for day to day, I would say, happiness and amplification of your efforts, and a sense of purpose, a sense of achievement, a sense of contribution that you want to have at the end of each day while you're working.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So can you talk about some of the challenges that you faced while trying to pursue climate finance and even in the work you're doing now?
I would say the biggest challenge right now is probably data. I think we don't have standard disclosures yet for climate finance data. Companies are not required to produce reports yet by the Securities Exchange Commission that stick to a certain standard of data. So what's happening is the data are out there, but they're very unstructured. And so you can also see why textual analysis, the newer methods that are coming up using data analytics, machine learning, AI and chat GPT kind of language models. All of these techniques are being used very heavily to study climate finance. So to just give you an example, I mentioned that we are studying how transition risks, such as decarbonization policies, policies to subsidize green innovation, policies to put restrictions on drilling, new drilling, how are all of these affecting energy prices? Now, to study this, you need to know where do these policies stand? What is there a progress in these policies, or are the policies being backtracked by certain administrations and governments? And there is no easy index of that. So what do? You have to look at whether there's news daily in the data. You have to scrub through New York Times, Wall Street Journal, other newspapers, possibly The Economist, and try and get a sense of what news is actually arriving in the market. What are people's perceptions about the implementations of these policies? Sometimes there's a big bang like the Inflation Reduction Act, but then sometimes there's smaller pieces of information, and you have to try and gather these information from the data. So the biggest challenge right now in climate finance, in my view, is that climate science is relatively well established. The climate scientists have been studying these issues for at least 30 to 40 years, if not longer. And they have built very powerful and I think meaningful and predictive models of how climate is change is likely to occur, and many of their predictions from 20 years back are unfortunately playing out true as we speak. However, to take that to finance and economics research, try and understand what is the impact on households' consumption, what is the impact on energy prices, how is this altering the behavior of fossil fuel firms or renewable firms? Are they innovating? How do you measure innovation? You have to look at like patents data, but those come with some lags. So data, so this is a real-time problem that we are trying to grapple with, but data are not standardized. They are coming with lags. And to me, this is the biggest challenge. And if I could just add one last point on that, when I'm taking this to India now, I'm just at very early stages of my climate finance foray of research into India. The data challenges are even bigger because in the United States, even in the private sector, outside of government agencies, there's a lot of data production in United States
Yeah.
or in Europe. But in a country like India, China, which are going to be very crucial to climate change transition because they produce some of the largest emissions in a global sense, and given their growth rates, they will be among the largest producers. So it's very important to bring them on board on climate change reforms. But currently, we don't actually produce great data in these countries.
Yeah, absolutely. So, are you and your team kind of trying to overcome these challenges in any way, or is it kind of more of something that you're just doing, as you said, like scraping through the news apps, etc.?
So mostly we are trying to do it through research. As I said, sometimes we are doing this scraping of data through news. We are employing pre-doctoral research assistants to help us with that. They need to have some data analytics, language model, chat GPT kind of skills as well to sort of speed up our work. Sometimes we work with those who are in central banks. For example, I have an advisory role at the center, at the Committee for Financial Research Advisory Council. So Climate Finance Research Advisory Council of the US Treasury and the Financial Stability Oversight Council. So it's a group of academics, practitioners, climate scientists, and of course, Treasury and FSOC officials. Sometimes we discuss what sort of data should be gathered in the financial sector, overlay that with data on climate itself, overlay that with data on companies to which banks and non-bank financial institutions are lending, etc. So I would say lots of efforts are in work. Similarly, some efforts are at work for the Securities Exchange Commission to get companies to standardize their climate disclosures so that we can just look up quarterly filings and actually start having a standardized sense of who is doing what. There are NGOs that do very interesting work, given that you have your own NGO. There's an NGO called CDP, Climate Disclosure Project, which has been putting together over the last 10 to 12 years annual surveys of questionnaires through which they are eliciting a lot of information out of companies. One challenge again with that data is that because it's questionnaire based, it's not standardized, and a lot of text is reported in the answers. And now we have to analyze this text using certain kinds of methods on processing text. So it's challenging, but I would say things are moving forward. Sometimes when you apply these methods, you can make your own data algorithms and methods available through your website so that other researchers don't have to reinvent the wheel, doing the textual scraping and organizing the data. You can just make data sets available now through the replication code and algorithms that you used in your own research. So of course, there's sort of synergies and spillovers. So research, just like innovation in green technology, research is also in some sense like an innovative enterprise. And every research paper that gets written has some positive spillovers onto others because it shapes other people's thinking. But beyond just the idea or concept part of it, you can put out your data, algorithms, and indices, and then others can use it in their own research. And, that's a huge externality onto the research community.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely a big problem that you guys face, and I think these efforts are gonna help to kind of overcome that. So this interview has been really great. Just as one last question to wrap up, what would be a piece of advice that you would offer to high school and undergrad students who are looking to pursue climate finance?
Um, yeah, I would say first and foremost, I would say like do climate finance if that's your calling. Not everyone in the world has to have a calling to do everything. So I think you have to internally feel passionate about pursuing a subject. So if that's your calling, go ahead and give it your 110% or 120%, whatever you can pack into your every single minute every day. Second, however, if you do pursue climate finance, I would say the first thing you should do is to just understand climate science itself. Go to the first principles, read some accessible books about climate change. One very accessible book I've read recently, which is also short but written by an expert. Only an expert can truly be minimalistic in how they explain ideas. It's by Professor Kerry Emanuel of MIT. It's called What Do We Know About Climate Change? It's now out in its second edition. There's about, I think, 70 or 75 pages. I've read it twice. I don't think I've fully understood every word of it. So I hope to read it one more time, perhaps sometime later in this year. But I would say go to the foundations and understand climate change itself well, firstly. And third, I would say then go in any direction you want to go. You want to do research, you want to be in an NGO that does this, you want to be in a company helping it to address climate change, you want to become part of the policy or the government to do this, pursue whatever direction you want. All that I would say is like try and bring facts to the table. It's very easy in a subject like climate change and climate finance where a lot of things are going to happen in future. We don't know what that is going to be. It's very easy to take very hardened stands without actually having data and some rationale for taking those stands in your hand. So I would say anchor your thinking and opinions around grounded research, what others have found, or data and facts that you can collect yourself, or analysis that you can do yourself. There's always some imagination involved, but it's good if it's anchored in some sort of real understanding of facts and data on hand. And no, the last thing I wanted to say in that was I think teamwork is very important. It's a very big topic. Most likely, you'll end up working with other folks in the area. I feel that as a financial economist, anything I do in climate finance would be better off if I'm actually simultaneously working with a climate scientist. I'm not doing that as of yet, except in the committee that I mentioned of the Treasury, which brings together financial economists and climate scientists. But on and off, I interact with some climate scientists just to ensure that being not an expert in that subject myself, am I getting enough information and are my ideas on the right track or not? And last point on this, it's very important to listen to other people, read other people's ideas, and at the same time remain creative and innovative yourself. The way I think about the world is, everyone has like a circle of their own vision, and everyone's visions are partly overlapping, but not fully. Every person has a different vantage point through which they see the world, and it's good to think, read, listen so that you get these overlapping visions that collectively actually sharpen your ability to get at what is really happening out there. Like truth is a very strong term, but what exactly is happening? You get closer and closer to understanding and analyzing that. If you're not just limited in your own blinkered vision of how you think the world is working, but you are able to assimilate ideas, learn from them, improvise on them, and at the same time give it your own creative and innovative edge at the same time. So all the very best to all of you. I hope you find your own calling. I think that's more important than doing climate finance. It could just be singing a song or coming up with a new recipe. It's all good as long as it's your own calling. All the very best.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And I think a lot of high school students can apply that to their own lives. So, yeah, thank you for taking the time to do this interview with me. It's been really helpful.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.